At 1730 hours on August 31st, 2025, the chemical tanker Scarlet Ray was making a routine northbound transit through the northern Red Sea when the bridge suddenly filled with noise. A single hard concussion off the starboard quarter, a column of spray, and the kind of silence that follows a near hit at sea. The master's voice over the radio was flat, professional. Splash close aboard. All crew accounted for. Continuing transit, only later would the footage, the UKMTO notice, and competing claims stitch together what happened that evening. At first glance, it looked like a merchant incident. A nervous captain, a frightened crew, and a media cycle hungry for drama. But war at sea is almost never just one thing. Hidden inside that single splash were multiple lines of intent: political theater, asymmetric tactics, and a test of the rules that govern naval restraint. The Houthis claimed responsibility almost immediately. Maritime authorities logged the splash close aboard, and ship managers flagged their crew safe but shaken. The message was clear. The Red Sea was now a firing range for a political grievance. Since late 2023, a pattern had formed. Houthi forces in Yemen declared a campaign against vessels linked to Israel, and the Red Sea, a narrow, strategic artery for global trade, became the point where political messaging met kinetic capability. The attacks were not continuous thunder. They were a series of calibrated asymmetric probes. Rockets, shore-launched missiles, armed drones, explosive unmanned surface vessels, and the occasional sea-skimming threat. Each successful probe didn't just damage a hull, it raised insurance, rerouted cargo, and forced navies to posture where once there was safe transit. At 1724 hours, nearly an hour before the Scarlet Ray's loud bang, an Israeli Sa'ar-6 corvette was on patrol in the sector as part of routine convoy protection and presence operations. The Sa'ar-6, a small, capable warship built for littoral dominance and air defense in Israel's doctrine, was in a position where its sensors could reach the shipping lanes and the Yemeni coastline beyond them. On her bridge, the watch team ran the familiar checks, AIS tracks, commercial traffic lanes, lookouts, and an always-on suite of radar and ESM that turns a flat horizon into a living tactical picture. At 1728, the corvette's radar paint changed. Not an enemy carrier or a surface task force, this was a different signature. A high-arc ballistic track rising from the coastline, followed by a clutter of small, low RCS contacts skimming the sea. The tactical action officer, his eyes on the scope and his hands on the keyboard, did the math on the fly. Range, bearing, likely time to impact, probable weapon class, ballistic or shore-launched projectile for the initial arc, unmanned aerial vehicles, and unmanned surface contacts for the smaller signatures. In short, saturation, with the explicit aim of forcing defenders to split their attention. Minutes in naval terms become a lifetime. The tactical decision tree unfolded on an electronic map. Classify, estimate intent, compute intercept windows, and decide action. The captain's voice was measured, but crisp. Go to general quarters. Elevate to condition 1, prepare decoys and point defenses, and log everything. The corvette's crew moved like a machine. Data inflows from the ESM, radar, and lookouts converged on the Combat Information Center. Every ping and bearing earned a timestamp and a confidence level. On a separate console, the electronic warfare operator began sweeping for emissions, GPS jamming, radio bursts, and potential guidance links that might be used to steer weapons to the tanker. This was not bluster. It was the pragmatic choreography that keeps sailors alive. At 1730, the merchant's report hit the maritime community. A hard shock aft, a plume, a claim of a hit by the Houthis. On the corvette's screens, the same timestamp showed a sea skim contact and a ballistic arc that splashed practically on the tanker's wake. Senior watch officers briefed the captain. Trajectory consistent with a shore-launched short-range ballistic or an unguided rocket. Several low-flying aerials simultaneously approaching the tanker's sector. Possible use of decoys to saturate sensors. The only accurate metric was time. There were too few seconds to rewind, but enough minutes to make the critical choices that separate restraint from escalation. The captain chose restraint. That word is political and tactical in equal measure. Shoot, and the whole region amplifies the incident into strategic headlines. Withhold, and a merchant might burn. He ordered the layered defense. Soft kill measures first. Chaff and decoys maneuver the escort to maximize the protective arc between the tanker and the presumed inbound vectors. And ready the hard-kill interceptors should an inbound cross a threshold. On the corvette, the Sea Dome, the naval derivative of Israel's Iron Dome, and its radar-fed interceptors were cued and ready to throw missiles into the air if needed. But the first rule of presence is to demonstrate deterrence before pulling triggers. Electronic warfare now became the unsung protagonist. EW suites on both escort and merchant platforms began to hash the environment. Was the GPS being spoofed? Were command links being held open to guide a UAV swarm? Past incidents in this campaign had shown something predictable and unsettling. Phantom contacts, false returns, and bursts of jamming that make radars scream. Then, the moment that cinema loves, small, unmanned surface craft, explosive speedboats in some cases, closed from the coastline, their wakes feathering the radar. Simultaneously, a pair of UAVs peeled off their inbound vector and dove toward the surface with the intent to detonate or distract. Eyes on the flight deck, trigger fingers poised on launchers, the corvette's CIWS barrels hummed to life, tracking and engaging low RCS targets. Decoys bloomed in the air, chaff clouds and soft-kill RF interference that complicate a seeker's lock. The combined effect was ugly, violent, and precise, a mosaic of actions designed to overwhelm. The defensive salvos did their job. Some drones were seen to burn out or veer and crash into the sea. Others were suspected to have been jammed off course. The tanker, in the end, sustained no critical damage. Tactically, because asymmetric actors seek to impose cost with limited means. Strategically, because each splash in the Red Sea was a line written into the larger political ledger being kept in Sana'a, Tehran, Jerusalem, and Riyadh. Each attempted strike forced extra patrols, diverted commercial lanes, and pushed rhetoric into kinetic follow-ups. Within days of the Scarlet Ray incident, the region saw reciprocal strikes on Houthi infrastructure and port facilities. Actions that are framed domestically as counterterrorism and framed regionally as escalation. Those retaliatory strikes, in turn, feed the next round of maritime risk and propaganda. Back on the bridge, the log filled with neat entries: bearing, range, signature, classification, operator notes. That small data set would become decisive later, for legal claims, for diplomatic briefings, and for the public narrative each side would spin. The corvette's commander remained careful, assertive in defense, conservative in offense. That is how disciplined navies manage asymmetric threats, by protecting commerce while avoiding the political cascade triggered by an offensive salvo. The tanker continued north. The corvette repositioned and maintained overwatch. The region breathed out for a few hours. At 1800 hours, less than half an hour after the Scarlet Ray cleared the danger area, the sea itself was calm again. But in every operations room from Tel Aviv to Washington, Riyadh to London, the digital echoes of that near hit were still flashing across screens. The Scarlet Ray's owners issued a formal report. No injuries, no damage, continuing passage. But the real story lay in the telemetry gathered by the Israeli corvette's radar and EW suites. Within minutes of the incident, encrypted data packets were uplinked via satellite to Israeli Navy HQ in Haifa and shared through Allied fusion centers. Every frequency spike, every radar cross-section, every trajectory arc of the drones and unmanned boats became evidence. The technical analysis confirmed what the crew already suspected. The ballistic launch from Yemen had been short-range, crude in design, but effective in shock value. The swarm of UAVs was mixed, some armed, some decoys, some likely configured to jam radar or mimic signatures. The unmanned surface craft were the most dangerous. Packed with explosives, they carried the destructive potential of a small torpedo. This was not improvisation. It was a coordinated, layered attack, designed not necessarily to sink a ship, but to test naval defenses, to overload decision-making cycles, and to prove that the Houthis could threaten shipping at will. Telemetry also revealed something worrying. Several drones had carried emitters broadcasting false navigational signals. In simple terms, they were trying to bend GPS coordinates to make merchant vessels see themselves off course. By nightfall, the Houthis released footage of a missile launch, accompanied by a statement. "We struck an Israeli-linked vessel in retaliation for aggression." The claim was exaggerated. The tanker had survived. But the claim itself was the point. In modern hybrid warfare, perception is ammunition. Israel immediately pushed back, releasing its own footage from the Sayar-6. Thermal imagery of drones being destroyed mid-air, a timestamp proving interception before impact. To Israeli audiences, the message was clear. Our Navy defends our interests and the global commons. To international shipping companies, the subtext was reassurance. Your cargo is safer under our watch. But to Yemen's Houthis, success wasn't measured in tonnage sunk. Success was forcing global headlines, raising insurance premiums, and reminding the world that even with limited resources, they could disrupt trillion-dollar trade arteries. At 0200 hours local time, less than 8 hours after the incident, the response came. A wave of Israeli precision strikes targeted radar sites, drone assembly hangars, and suspected missile storage facilities around Hodeidah and Al-Salif. UAV footage showed secondary explosions, proof that caches of weapons had been hit. Hours later, U.S. Central Command confirmed that American assets had also conducted self-defense strikes on drone launchers preparing for follow-up attacks. A Houthi strike or attempted strike. A coalition defensive action. Retaliatory airstrikes against infrastructure. The Houthis declaring victory regardless. But the Scarlet Ray incident was different because it had unfolded under the direct protection of an Israeli warship, and restraint had been chosen over retaliation at sea. That distinction mattered. In London, underwriters at Lloyd's met to reassess Red Sea premiums. For years, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait had been listed as a high-risk area. But now the northern Red Sea itself was moving into the same category. Insurance on a $100 million tanker could now spike by hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single transit. Shipping companies faced three choices. Continue using the Red Sea, under escort, paying higher premiums. Divert around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and millions in fuel costs. Anchor ships and wait, bleeding money but avoiding risk. For the world's consumers, these choices translated into higher prices, from crude oil to electronics, from grain to manufactured goods. In Tehran, Houthi backers quietly celebrated. The attack showed that even with the presence of Israeli and American naval assets, their proxies could still draw blood, or at least make the world nervous. In Riyadh, the calculus was different. Saudi Arabia, still balancing détente with Iran after years of proxy conflict in Yemen, viewed the incident as proof that peace remained fragile. Every Houthi strike risked undoing months of delicate diplomacy. In Cairo, Suez Canal authorities watched nervously. The Red Sea is Egypt's economic lifeline. If shipping diverted en masse around Africa, canal revenues would plummet. Stability in the Red Sea wasn't just a security matter, it was existential for Egypt's economy. For naval strategists, the Scarlet Ray incident became a case study. First lesson: swarms matter. Even cheap drones and boats, if launched together, can force warships into difficult decisions. Second lesson: EW dominance is as vital as missiles. The ability to jam, spoof, and confuse is now as deadly as a warhead. Third lesson: restraint is a weapon. By not firing indiscriminately, navies can deny adversaries the propaganda of escalation. Israeli planners began reviewing whether the SAR-6's defensive systems needed augmentation, more interceptors, stronger EW suites, or even unmanned escorts to screen tankers. American planners looked at the incident and saw echoes of future conflicts in the Pacific, where swarms of cheap drones might accompany missile salvos in a Taiwan scenario. For the Scarlet Ray's crew, the ordeal was both terrifying and surreal. Interviews later revealed their fear when the plume erupted beside the ship. Some thought it was a torpedo, others a mine. On the Israeli corvette, the mood was professional but reflective. The captain's after-action log included the line, "Defended convoy without escalation." Doctrine validated for sailors, that was victory, survival, mission success, and restraint. The Red Sea has always been a contested space, from the days of empire to the Cold War to the present. But in 2025, it has become a laboratory for the future of naval warfare, where drones, ballistic missiles, and electronic deception meet conventional fleets and global trade. The Scarlet Ray didn't sink. The convoy steamed on. But every actor, the Houthis, Israel, Iran, the US, shipping firms, and insurers, walked away with lessons, costs, and calculations. And so the incident lives on, not in the damage it caused, but in the shadow it casts. A single splash in the Red Sea almost triggered a chain reaction, proof that in modern conflict, restraint can be as decisive as firepower, and that the world's most fragile choke points can become flashpoints in the blink of an eye.